Welcome to our deep dives today. I know as pastors and Bible study leaders, we're all super familiar with Philippians 4:6,
Oh, yeah, for sure.
but we're not here to rehash the basics. We want the good stuff,
Yeah.
the stuff that sparks a new sermon illustration
Yeah.
or even like a whole fresh take on the verse for a series.
Right, exactly. And I think you've got a really unique resource for that today with this deep dive.
Mm.
We've got AI analysis of sermons on Philippians 4:6, and it's from such a wide range of preachers.
Oh,
It's kind of like we get to peek into how other pastors have wrestled with this passage and see what unique angles come up.
okay. I like that. So what jumped out at you when you were looking at all these different approaches?
Yeah.
Like what were some of the big themes that emerged?
Well, one of the first things I noticed was this idea of gratitude as like an offensive move,
Interesting.
Not just thanking God when good things happen,
Hmm.
but using gratitude to actually push back against anxiety.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not just saying thanks. It's more like thanking God as if the answer to your prayer is already here,
Well,
claiming that victory in advance.
I mean, it makes you think about prayer differently, right?
It really does. Imagine the shift that could create,
Yeah.
not just in our personal prayer lives, but in how we teach our congregations to pray.
I'm curious about that. Like, what kind of impact do you think that shift could have? Because it's not just passive acceptance, right? It's almost like spiritual jujitsu or something.
Yeah.
It's taking that anxious energy and like redirecting it into faith. What resonates with you, listener, about that approach?
I think it's powerful, and that actually leads into another big theme that came up. A lot of these sermons were about mental discipline.
Mm-hmm.
This idea that you're not just hoping for peace, but you're actively training your mind, like an athlete,
Right.
to focus on, whatever is true, whatever is honorable.
Yeah.
A lot of pastors were connecting that back to Philippians 4:8,
Yeah. That whole list.
that whole list of what to fill your mind with.
And that's where I was struck by this God box analogy that kept coming up.
Oh, yeah.
Like the idea of actually writing down your worries and then
Uh-huh.
putting them in a box, literally, like
Yeah.
as a way of physically giving them over to God.
Mhm.
And I got to say, it sounded kind of cheesy at first,
It does sound a little cheesy.
but I'm wondering if there's something powerful about that physical action.
I think so. I mean, even if it sounds cheesy, think about it. It takes those worries out of your head. It makes it a choice,
Okay.
right? And it's so adaptable. You could use a prayer journal, a note on your phone, even just tearing up the paper. It's about the intentional choice to release those burdens.
It's a great reminder that even when things are tough, we still have a choice in how we respond.
Exactly.
And speaking of choices, one thing that was interesting was how the sermons were kind of split between two approaches to Philippians 4:6.
Oh, yeah.
Some really focused on refusing worry outright, like seeing it as unnatural and unhelpful.
Right.
And then others focus more on finding joy, even in the middle of tough situations.
It's like two sides of the same coin.
Yeah. It kind of makes you think, is it about eliminating negativity completely, or is it more about shifting our perspective on it?
Right, because both approaches have some merit.
Yeah.
It's interesting to see how they play out in different sermons. One pastor even quoted Corrie ten Boom. He said, "Worry won't empty tomorrow of its sorrow. It will empty today of its strength."
That's a powerful quote.
Yeah, it's so relevant today.
It is. With everything going on, there's so much to be anxious about.
Exactly.
So it's like, how do we help people find that peace?
Well, one thing a lot of these pastors did was use stories to really bring that point home.
Okay.
Biblical stories, of course, like Paul and Silas singing in prison,
Right.
but also stories of missionaries praying for decades with seemingly no results, even like New York City taxi drivers.
Okay.
They just expect chaos.
They just roll with it.
They just roll with it. They're not fazed by it.
That's a good point. It's about that mindset.
Exactly.
There was one illustration that really stuck with me. One pastor used optical illusions.
Oh, wow.
Those images that can look like two different things depending on how you see them. And his point was that it's not the situation itself that changes, but our perception of it.
Wow. I love that.
I thought that was brilliant.
Right?
That's such a good visual metaphor for what we're talking about.
It really is. And it makes me wonder, what kind of visual metaphors could you, listener, use to teach this verse? Maybe something from your own life, or a pop culture reference that would connect with your congregation.
Yeah.
It's about finding those creative ways to make this ancient wisdom come alive.
Exactly. Because at its heart, Philippians 4:6 is about relationship, not ritual.
Right.
And that actually leads into another big theme that kept popping up.
Oh, that's
The sermons that really emphasize conversational prayer,
Oh, yeah.
where Thanksgiving is just part of this ongoing dialogue with God.
Mhm.
It's not about coming to God with this laundry list of demands,
Right.
but it's about cultivating that sense of constant connection.
I love that.
And it's so easy to fall into that trap of, formal request-focused prayer. But how do you, as a pastor or a Bible study leader, how do you nurture that sense of conversational prayer in your own community?
That's the real question.
What practices or teachings have you found helpful?
Yeah.
Because when we start thinking about Philippians 4:6 in the context of like a real vibrant relationship with God, that's when the verse really comes alive.
Yeah, you're right. It goes beyond just platitudes and becomes something much deeper.
Exactly.
It becomes something that can really transform us.
That's a great place to help pause. I
Yeah.
think we'll pick up the conversation in our next segment.
Sounds good. You know, it's so easy to get caught up in like the mechanics of prayer.
Oh, yeah. Good.
Like, how often should I pray? What position should I be in? Do I need to find the perfect words?
All that stuff.
All that. But what really struck me in these sermons was this focus on the why of prayer.
Okay.
Like, it's not about checking off a box. It's about drawing closer to God, about experiencing that peace that passes understanding.
What's interesting is that a couple of pastors actually dug into the Greek word for anxiety in Philippians 4:6.
Oh, really?
Merimna. And it literally means to be in pieces,
Wow.
like your mind is fractured. And it just adds a whole other dimension, doesn't it?
It does.
Because then that idea of God's peace guarding our hearts and minds, it becomes so much more powerful.
Right. It's not just about feeling calm.
Right.
It's about being made whole again, finding unity in the middle of chaos.
That is deep. And it makes you think about the context of Philippians, right? Like, Paul wrote this from prison.
That's right.
He wasn't in a place of comfort and ease, yet he was overflowing with joy
Yeah.
and encouraging others to find that same joy.
It really challenges our definition of peace, doesn't it?
It does.
It wasn't about being free from hardship for Paul. It was
Yeah.
about this inner strength, this stability that couldn't be shaken by anything.
So we've talked about gratitude as a weapon and mental discipline and choosing joy. It's almost like we're building a toolkit for dealing with anxiety.
Right.
But the sermons also touched on something else really important,
What's that?
recognizing that we can't always go it alone.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't about bootstrapping our way to happiness.
No.
It's about acknowledging our need for God and leaning on his strength to carry us through.
There was this great quote from one of the sermons. I wrote it down. Worry is unreasonable, unnatural, unhelpful, and unnecessary.
Oh,
It's a choice.
it is.
We can choose to lean on God instead.
And that reliance on God can take so many forms.
Right.
One pastor talked about Daniel continuing to pray even though he knew it could cost him his life. Another one brought up missionaries praying for decades
Wow.
for a breakthrough that they might not even live to see.
That's incredible, that kind of persistent faith.
It's inspiring.
It really is.
Right?
That unwavering commitment to prayer, even when it's hard.
It's a reminder that sometimes the answer isn't, no, it's not yet.
It's good.
Speaking of not yet, you know those missionaries who prayed for 40 years?
Oh, yeah.
Well, the story goes that when they finally returned to that small church in China,
Yeah.
it was thriving.
Wow.
God had been working behind the scenes all along.
That gives me chills.
Yeah.
Talk about a sermon illustration that would stick with people.
Right.
It reminds us that our perspective is so limited,
Totally.
but God sees the whole picture. He's got this, even when we can't see it.
That's the beauty of faith.
It is. You know what I appreciate about these AI-analyzed sermons? Is that they expose us to such a wide range of approaches.
I agree.
We've got practical tips, theological insights, powerful stories from the Bible and from history. It's like a buffet of ideas.
It is. And the best part is you, our listener, get to choose what resonates with you.
Yes.
What speaks to your unique context, your congregation's needs.
What are you going to take back and weave into your own teaching?
That's what this deep dive is all about. It's not about giving you a prepackaged sermon.
Right.
It's about sparking your creativity.
Yeah.
Helping you to see Philippians 4:6 with fresh eyes.
And speaking of fresh eyes, one sermon really emphasized the importance of embracing holy emotions.
Oh, interesting.
Not letting our feelings control us,
Right.
but seeing them as indicators of where our hearts are at.
It's a good reminder that we're not robots. You know?
Yeah.
It's okay to feel anxious, to feel overwhelmed.
Of course.
But we don't have to stay there.
Right.
We can bring those emotions to God and he can transform them into peace.
Which brings us back to that idea of prayer as a conversation, not a ritual.
Yes.
It's about bringing our whole selves to God,
Mm.
mess and all,
Yeah.
and trusting that he can handle it.
He absolutely can. One pastor compared it to watching birds.
Okay.
You know, if God takes care of something as small and seemingly insignificant as a sparrow, how much more will he care for us?
That's such a comforting image.
It is.
And it's something we can all relate to no matter our background or denomination.
Yeah,
The simple truth is God cares.
he does.
He sees us. He hears us. And he wants to give us peace. You know that image of God caring for the sparrows? It's such a beautiful way to think about Philippians 4:6.
It is. It reminds us that this isn't just a verse to memorize, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
It's an invitation to experience a deeper relationship with the God who offers that peace.
And it's an invitation with real practical steps. We've been talking about gratitude, mental discipline, choosing joy, persistent prayer.
It's a whole toolkit for dealing with anxiety.
Yeah, it's one thing to know the verse, but it's something else to actually put it into practice.
Right. And then to help our congregations to do the same.
One pastor actually used this phrase, talking faith versus walking faith.
I like that.
It made me think of that, saying, your actions speak so loudly I can barely hear what you're saying.
So true.
Our faith should be something we live out, not just talk about.
And living it out means being in community.
Oh, for sure.
So many of the sermons we looked at emphasized that we're not meant to do this alone.
We need each other.
Yeah, we need to support each other, share our burdens, encourage one another in prayer.
You know, because, let's be honest, sometimes those burdens feel really heavy.
Oh, absolutely.
Sometimes the anxiety wins, the worry takes over.
It happens to all of us.
And that's okay. We need to create spaces where people feel safe to be honest about their struggles.
Yes, to admit that they don't have it all figured out.
Because we're all on this journey together,
That's right.
and we don't have to pretend to have all the answers.
No. We can come to God as we are, brokenness and all.
And trust that he's big enough to handle it.
He is. And that's what's so powerful about Philippians 4:6, wouldn't you say?
It really is. It's not some magic formula for a problem-free life.
No, it's not about that.
It's more like a lifeline
Yeah.
in the middle of the storm.
A reminder that even when everything feels chaotic, God is still in control.
And he wants to give us peace. Not the kind the world offers.
But a peace that goes beyond anything we can understand.
A peace that guards our hearts and minds in Christ Jesus.
And that's the kind of peace we can offer our congregations.
Exactly. Not a promise of an easy life, but a promise of God's presence.
With us every step of the way.
And that's a message worth sharing.
It really is.
Yeah.
So as you go back to your ministries, listener,
Yes.
we hope this deep dive into Philippians 4:6 has given you some new ideas, some fresh perspectives.
A renewed passion for sharing this good news.
The good news of God's peace.
Thank you for joining us on this deep dive.
It's been a pleasure.
Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep diving deep into the Word.
And remember, don't just talk the talk, walk the walk. Let your life be a testament to the transformative power of Philippians 4:6.